I now give the floor to His Excellency Mulambo Hamakuni Haimbe, Minister for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Zambia.
Your Excellency, Philemon Yang, President of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, distinguished heads of state and government, honorable ministers, heads of intergovernmental organizations, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I congratulate you, Your Excellency, on assumption of the presidency of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly and assure you of Zambia's cooperation during your tenure. We extend Zambia's sincere gratitude to His Excellency, Mr. Dennis Francis, for the exemplary work exhibited during the 78th session. Mr. President, the theme for this session, quote, "Leaving no one behind, acting together for the advancement of peace, sustainable development, and human dignity for present and future generations," close quote, presents an opportunity for us to re-examine our priorities, redefine our mission, and sharpen our vision as we approach the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. Zambia therefore joins the UN Secretary General in congratulating member states for successfully adopting the Pact for the Future, which includes the Digital Global Compact and the Declaration on Future Generations. We further appreciate the work of Namibia and Germany in co-facilitating this process. It is our hope that the implementation of the Pact for the Future will address the multiple crises facing the world today. Mr. President, Zambia firmly believes that multilateralism is the only viable approach to solving regional and international challenges. In this regard, the creation of the United Nations almost 80 years ago provided new hope for the international community in the maintenance of international peace and security, promotion of justice, and improvement of living conditions for all people. However, this ideal is rapidly slipping away as global peace is increasingly threatened by the growing and sustained geopolitical tensions. As member states that share the ideals upon which the United Nations was founded, we must resolve to correct this course and uphold the principles enshrined in the UN Charter. The impact of conflict in some parts of the world has been felt across Africa through disruption, soaring prices of key commodities such as energy and other inputs of trade and production, resulting in increased cost of living. Zambia, like many other developing countries which are predominantly import dependent, has not been spared. It is therefore crucial that we address the root causes and structural drivers of conflict and promote peace-building efforts. We call for all warring parties to exercise restraint and flexibility for the sake of millions of civilians who are casualties of war and conflict. This call is particularly relevant for the raging conflict in the Sudan, the Middle East, and Ukraine. Mr. President, at regional level, Zambia held the chairmanship of the Southern Africa Development Community, SADC, organ on politics, defense, and security cooperation for the period August 2023 to August 2024, and therefore played a crucial role in the region in that capacity. Overall, the security and political situation in the region remains stable. However, there are still pockets of security challenges in some of our member states, such as the situation in the eastern parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC, and in the Cabo Delgado province in Mozambique, which SADC remains seized with. We implore the international community to support the various peace-building efforts in the DRC. We further call for support to the government of Mozambique in order to ensure that the exit of the SADC mission in Mozambique does not result in reversal of the gains made by that mission. Furthermore, Zambia recognizes the efforts of His Excellency Mr. João Manuel Lourenço, President of the Republic of Angola, as the African Union mediator in the facilitation of the Rwanda process aimed at restoring peace and security in the Eastern DRC, as well as the Nairobi process that equally aims at fostering peace in that country. Mr. President, climate change and extreme weather conditions threaten the very existence and balance of the world as we know it. It is clear that efforts to raise the standard of living for the world's poor are being adversely affected by the effects of climate change. For instance, this year, Zambia experienced the worst drought in recent times. This led the government to declare the drought as a national disaster and emergency to save the lives and safeguard livelihoods. We take this opportunity to thank our bilateral and multilateral partners who graciously responded to the clarion call to support Zambia's drought response strategy. This and similar scenarios in our region underscore the need to build local resilience and climate adaptation through various interventions, including, among others, climate financing from both private and public sources. In this regard, the need for the full actualization of the Loss and Damage Fund to help developing countries cope with climate-related disasters and extreme weather events cannot be overemphasized. We urge member states to focus their energies on achieving measurable outcomes at the forthcoming COP29 accordingly. Mr. President, it is becoming increasingly apparent that the SDGs may not be met by 2030, as only 17% of the SDG targets are on track, while the remaining 83% are either stagnated or regressing. Therefore, Zambia joins calls for massive investment and scaled-up action in order to close the financing gap, which is currently estimated to be around 4 trillion United States of America dollars. Failure to close this gap will adversely impact future generations. In the same vein, we call on the international community to scale up financing for developing countries to achieve the SDGs, including honoring commitments to contribute at least 0.7% of gross national income towards official development assistance. Further, the heavy burden of debt in some developing countries presents another major hurdle to the attainment of the SDGs, especially in Africa. These countries face a high risk of debt distress. There is need, therefore, for an effective debt workout mechanism that supports payment suspension, longer lending terms, and lower interest rates. Based on Zambia's experience, we call for further reforms to streamline the existing G20 framework for debt restructuring in order to enhance certainty and reduce the time it takes to conclude the process. Zambia further joins calls for the reform of the international financial architecture to make it fit for purpose and equitably address the development needs of all countries in the 21st century. Additionally, there is need to build capacities for least developed countries to access other innovative financial measures, such as debt for climate swaps and green and blue bonds, amongst others. Furthermore, Zambia joins other SADC member states in the call for a review of the use of unilateral economic instruments that curtail developing countries' access to development finance. Mr. President, aggressive tax avoidance and tax evasion have a corrosive effect on public trust, financial integrity, the rule of law, and sustainable development across the globe. International tax cooperation could significantly reduce illicit financial flows, a scourge that deprives economies, especially those in the developing world, of funding for development. Zambia therefore calls for the urgent conclusion of negotiations on the proposed UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation. This will enable developing countries to enhance their domestic resource mobilization. As co-facilitator of the negotiations of the outcome document for the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development in the coming months, we look forward to actively engaging with member states in the reform of the international financial architecture. Mr. President, science and technology are critical to achieving the SDGs. Developing countries' lack of access to technology has hindered the implementation of sustainable development practices, thus perpetuating the cycle of poverty and inequality. Hence, there is need to bridge the gap in digital technologies, including artificial intelligence, to promote efficiencies in health, climate, sustainable infrastructure, energy, agriculture, and other global development priorities. In this regard, we call for enhanced international cooperation to support developing countries to integrate technology through capacity building, technology transfer on mutually agreed terms, information exchange, and investment in research and development. Alongside the Pact for the Future, member states adopted a global digital compact. Zambia was honored to partner with Sweden in leading negotiations of this historical document. Mr. President, as part of its efforts to accelerate the attainment of the SDGs by 2030, Zambia has been implementing policies and programs aimed at creating a strong and resilient health system, reducing inequalities, eradicating poverty, and empowering women and girls. This is also consistent with the implementation of the International Conference on Population and Development Program of Action. Zambia welcomes the Declaration on Future Generations, which seeks to secure the well-being of future generations, in particular, their participation in decision-making. To reap the demographic dividend, Zambia continues to call for significant investments in the growing youth population, currently standing at 82% below the age of 35. Increased investments are needed in education, health, and empowerment of young people so that they can meaningfully contribute to the achievement of the SDGs. Mr. President, child and early forced marriage is a harmful practice that disproportionately affects girls, hindering their education, health, and overall well-being. In this regard, Zambia continues to make strides in the campaign to end child marriage by 2030 and safeguard the rights of girls by enacting relevant legislation to address this vice. President Hakainde Hichilema, being the African Union champion on ending child marriage, Zambia is pleased to report that the campaign is growing from strength to strength, with 32 of the 54 countries on the continent having launched national campaigns to end child marriage. However, more needs to be done. We call on all partners to join efforts and raise our voices to protect our children to end this harmful practice by 2030. Mr. President, in the face of the present geopolitical realities and calls to strengthen multilateralism, the need to reform the UN Security Council cannot be overemphasized. Reforms are necessary to make the Security Council better equipped and strengthened in its capacity to discharge its responsibilities of monitoring and safeguarding international peace and security. The representation of African states in the permanent category would correct this historical injustice, that has marginalized Africa's voice and will provide a vital perspective to the Council. Time has come for the Security Council to be representative, democratic, and accountable to all member states, irrespective of status. This is essential for its integrity as the custodian of international peace. Given that Africa constitutes the second largest bloc of the UN membership, proposals to reform the Security Council should heed Africa's core as espoused in the Common Africa Position as enshrined in the Ezulwini Consensus and the CETA Declaration. In this regard, we are pleased to note that the African Union Committee of 10, the C10, and the 5 permanent members, the P5, of the United Nations Security Council held a meeting during this session of the United Nations General Assembly. Such interactions should be encouraged in order to narrow the gap on the Security Council reforms. Finally, Mr. President, I wish to reaffirm that Zambia remains committed to strengthened multilateralism as a means of addressing the numerous global challenges affecting our people, including ending poverty and creating wealth in a sustainable manner. To this end, Mr. President, we should not remain indecisive and indifferent to this serious issue, nor should we forego this opportunity to make the world a better place for all humanity. In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the need for us to seriously consider the call for massive investment and scaled-up action if we are to make meaningful progress in achieving the SDGs, including implementation of the Pact for the Future. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Zambia.